Hello, my name is Tony. Director Robert Aldrich, for it is he once again, was drawn to subject matter which had some degree of originality going for it. Material that allowed him to portray a world of men in conflict, a world of beleaguered machismo and dynamic struggle, one that mirrored age-old yet timeless themes of reluctantly heroic underdogs, individuals invested with dubious moral fibre, railing against powerful enemies, representational of the established order, those corrupt edifices with all the juice and status. Men laid low for whom the odds are stacked against, yet pursue their goals no matter how loaded the dice or seemingly hopeless their quest. Because, well, what else are they gonna do? Emperor of the North, sometimes known as Emperor of the North Pole, is set in the years of the Great Depression in early 1930s US. Its characters are colourfully named fringe dwellers known only by an alias, transient members of an itinerant community, a ground zero subculture of the unemployed and unemployable, the jobless, homeless, the forgotten, travelling flotsam and jetsam of society, the tramp, the hobo, the bum, the underclass upon whom the rest of the world looked down. Illicitly, they ride the railways, stowing away in boxcars, hoping for handouts at the next stop. Work maybe, nickels and dimes, food, clothing, shelter, a tomorrow better than today, some purpose, meaning, something positive, or maybe nothing good at all. For some it's a way of life now, because with the passage of time, they don't know anything else. Yet this ramshackle society has its own rules, its own hierarchy, history, folk tales, mythology, and sense of dark humour. To be the best of the bums, the head hobo, the lord of the losers, is to be crowned the Emperor of the North Pole, ruler of a cold, frozen, lifeless wasteland of absolute nothing. But hey, it's still a dream, a goal, something to aspire to, is something, right? One such bum is A No. 1, Lee Marvin, a legendary aging drifter who rides the Oregon Pacific and Eastern Railroad. His nemesis is Shaq Ernest Borgnine, the conductor and guard on the 19 train, who ruthlessly and violently dispatches hobos who stow away on his locomotive. His weapon of choice is a hammer, and he's only too happy and willing to use it. Riding Shaq's train and living to tell the tale is the ultimate badge of honour in the hobo community. By pure chance, A No. 1 encounters a young and arrogant drifter, Cigarette Keith Carradine, a reckless, inexperienced kid full of his own bullshit, who jumps the number 19 at the same time as our hero. He gives the game away too slow and flighty not to be spotted by Shaq, who locks the two men in a freight car. Shaq sadistically anticipates breaking them out and breaking their heads at the next stop. A No. 1 sets fire to the bales of hay in the car, providing him with enough cover and chaos to escape, while Cigarette is apprehended. When Cigarette, a keen braggart of low intellectual function, boasts fervently to the rail workers that he alone rode Shaq's train and survived, making a fool of the guard, it not only makes him a marked man, Shaq is none too happy and out for a little payback, but incenses A No. 1 to the point where he makes a proclamation. He will ride Shaq's train all the way to Portland and earn the title Emperor of the North Pole. The hobo community is on his side, and the rail workers up and down the line all start running a book, taking bets on whether or not he will succeed. And that's the film, more or less, A No. 1's attempt to ride the 19 to Portland and Shaq's determination to stop him by whatever means necessary. Cigarette invites himself along for the ride, but will the volatile younger man prove to be an unlikely help or a more likely fatal hindrance, dragging both men down to their doom? You need to watch it to find out. Not enough? Okay. This held instant and lasting appeal for me. Robert Aldrich directing, his go-to cinematographer Joseph F. Byrock and composer Frank DeVol on board. The wonderfully artful period setting, the underused and intriguing subject matter, steam trains and nail-biting stunt work on those trains, Marvin and Borgnine engaged in a ferocious battles of wits, wills, and a final savage physical confrontation. The forward momentum of the narrative, the action, deftly handled suspense, the eternally fascinating concept of the underdog taking on the establishment. What's not to like? From my perspective, next to nothing, man. From that of the critics and the public in 1973 or 4, quite a lot it seemed. It played to mostly empty theatres, and the critical reception was one of outright rejection or scathing indifference. Another case of what they saw wasn't what I saw. And as I can only state the case from what I saw, that's what I'll do. And you can make up your own minds if you haven't already done that. It's a timeless story of the conflict between what we perceive as good and evil, the champion of the people and the face of the overlords represented by Marvin and Borgnine respectively. In the end, both men are on a crusade over nothing. There's nothing tangible to be won or gained by either, other than being the winner for their side and the self-validation that goes along with it. Marvin's character has nothing except his life to lose. Borgnine will lose face and reputation, but ultimately, as in all wars, there are no real winners and nothing will change. Different manifestations of the same people within the same mechanisms still hold all the power, and the same people at the bottom of the food chain will still be at the bottom of the food chain irrespective. But it's something, yeah? Lee Marvin was the coolest of ice-cool screen tough guys from a bygone age. His mellifluous voice marinated in bourbon and cigarettes, his weathered, increasingly craggy and lived-in face, rangy and tightly coiled physique, plus a personality and charisma that could project authentic menace, danger, pathos and tenderness in equal measure as the need arose. Whatever he was in, however he performed, he was always watchable. Number 1 is one of his great early 70s roles, up there alongside Prime Cut, Pocket Money, Spike's Gang and Monty Walsh. He's a legend for a reason, and it's a fucking good reason. Ernest Borgnine had a talent for projecting unbridled eye-popping malevolence in flesh and spirit, adept at channeling seething rage and a propensity for crushing violence. A physically imposing character, overweight but with an uncharacteristic speed and thuggish grace of movement. He is a tremendously brutish and merciless villain, a man despised and feared almost as much by his colleagues as the hobo fraternity. Keith Carradine provides decent support as the cocksure loser Cigarette, a young man upon whom youth is most definitely wasted. Carradine is impressive in this early role and holds his own alongside two seasoned professional actors like Marvin and Borgnine. If he found the prospect of acting alongside them daunting or intimidating, it doesn't show in his confident performance. There is a wider supporting cast, the likes of Charles Tyner, Elisha Cook Jr. and Simon Oakland, seasoned character actors who all spark the target just as you would expect. Christopher Knopf's original screenplay has a nice line in period dialogue and language, and his narrative runs like a series of linear chapters in a novel, helping to keep up the pace. It seems like when the train stops at a station, that's the cue for another chapter to begin. Frank Duvall's musical score is inspired by the popular sounds of the time and the geographical locations. There's a theme song by Marty Robbins, A Man and a Train, written by Duvall and Hal David. It later turned up on greatest hits and best of album compilations by the singer. Can't say I like it much, it's very banal. In my opinion, Joseph F. Byrock's cinematography might be his best work. Steady, precise, roving camera work with a loving eye for the beauty of the scenery and the sheer grandeur of machines in motion, coupled with the smart and fluid capture of the sometimes frantic action. And then there's Aldrich and his direction and philosophy. He once said he was drawn to films and characters that explored the struggle for self-determination, the struggle for what a character wants his life to be. Characters who feel strongly enough about something not to be concerned with the prevailing odds, but to struggle against those odds. He could have been speaking directly about Emperor of the North. He directs with a deep affection for the subject matter, and his usual unflinching approach to violence, corruption, evil, and people pushed to their limits in adverse circumstances they might not necessarily have chosen, but are determined to overcome. His usual lyrical style and punchy bravado are present and correct throughout. Still not enough? Okay. Most of the action and stunt work takes place on moving trains. The final fight is bone-crunching and bloody. Some sweaty, grueling stuff infused with nervous brutality. There is much climbing and hanging onto the locomotive, running across the roof and clinging on underneath the freight cars. Dark and grim as it may be, there are moments of relatively well-judged humour. Prime example is the scene when number 1 partakes of a baptism in a river performed by a local religious community. It's a cover for Cigarette stealing some clothes. Our hero becomes easily distracted by what could be described as an early wet t-shirt event. There's more, but that's enough, okay? I feel like I'm in something of a minority here. Not an oppressed minority with a stamp of victimhood running through me like Brighton through a stick of rock. Not like that, but sort of out on a bit of an isolated limb, because even Tarantino doesn't seem to credit this film much, and he's a significant Aldrich advocate. He accused the director of giving in to corny 30s theatrics and delivering a film that seemed to be akin to a Damon Runyon-esque musical about hobos. Much as I concur with many of his opinions on the movies in general, general, I couldn't disagree with him more in this instance. Yep, some of it might feed on theatrical corn, but I think that reflects the prevailing popular culture of the time and place in an atmospheric historical sense, and the only way it resembles Guys and Dolls is by taking place in the same period setting. It certainly isn't an urban film, which Guys and Dolls was, and was Runyan's preferred environmental backdrop for his writings. Emperor of the North is strictly rural. What I got was a unique and exhilarating piece of genre filmmaking, set in the same Depression-era past as Aldrich's The Grissom Gang and Walter Hill's The Street Fighter, two similarly excellent works combining tarnished glamour and crunchy violence to win in effect. Aldrich was a director still at the very top of his creative game. That's what I saw. As to what anyone else saw, they should have gone to fucking Specsavers, or whatever was the optometric equivalent of the day. Thank you for your time and attention. I would like to express sincere gratitude for both. If you want to, hit like, dislike, post a comment and or subscribe. If you feel particularly rash, you could sign up to my Patreon page and receive new content earlier and support this channel into the bargain. Be my guest. There'll be a link kicking about somewhere, probably in the description. Most new content will land there first, the custom of late. I'll be back with more just as soon as time and life permits. Farewell for now, pilgrims.